And the day that we had circled on our calendar is finally here. The Las Vegas Raiders enjoyed their first day in pads today. Eddie Paskal hanging out with my guy, Jesse Merrick from News 3 here in the desert. And Jesse, about, let's call it a week now into camp, and the pads finally came on. Raiders go 2 hours. Oh, by the way, this is the Raiders Training Camp podcast presented by SiriusXM. Got to make sure we keep our pals at Sirius happy. But Jesse, we finally got here. We heard from the big boys. We heard from the speed guys. Like, this is when it really starts, right? This is when we kind of get into the swing of things in camp. And it felt good today, man. On a rainy, windy, bizarrely kind of humid, cloudy day here in Vegas. But it felt good to see the boys in action.
Yeah, it was a football weather type of day. You know, it was awesome. Bilal Nichols even said it. He's like, you know, it doesn't really start for the big guys until the pads come on. And now this is real football. They actually get to do it. Spillane called it football-like. That's a thing of the past now. We're really playing football. I got my notepad out. I actually have stuff to talk about. It's written down, a couple pages. Like, I love that. This is the time we really get to see what these guys can do.
Yeah, and I tweeted out actually because I was in here early this morning. Not a flex at all. That's the way the schedule aligned. But I was in here early
because he's talking to me. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I'm looking at you dead in the eye. No, but when I was in here earlier, like it was raining and cloudy, and I tweeted out, I was like, it really does feel like it's the most football thing ever to have rain on the first day of pads. But Jesse, let's just dive in, right? First day of pads, no shortage of things to talk about, and let us begin here with. During one of the portions of practice, one of the team portions, if I remember correctly, friend of the program, Maxx Crosby.
Shout out to Maxx.
Big shout out to Maxx. Maxx, we're doing what you asked. So Maxx yells over to the sideline and encouraged in, let's call it a colorful manner, for you and I to discuss some of the things that he had just done on the field. Let's start here. Maxx Crosby, man on a mission today, was a beast, very much looked like the all-pro, all-everything that he is. What stood out to you from number 98's first day in pads?
One-man wrecking crew. I mean, look, that's what you need from your leaders on day one of practice. Maxx Crosby was everywhere. I believe he was also wearing a mic as well, right?
I believe so.
I mean, that could be some stuff that's dropping soon, going to be some good content for Raider Nation. That guy proved that he is that dude. I mean, look, running all over the place, running past anybody and everybody that was put in front of him. And that's no knock on anyone out there. This guy does that to everyone. I think he kind of gave some welcome to the NFL moments, to Michael Mayer. But that's a thing that kid is going to grow from. And that competition, he's not going to get better competition, better work than that. And he gets a whole handful of weeks to do that and continue to grow and build his game off of it.
Yeah, I mean, Maxx is, we talk about it all the time, just pure energy, 100,000 million miles an hour, literally from the moment he steps on the field. But I think for us, right, and you and I have talked about this, where the first couple of days of camp are great, right? It on a very reasonable level, it helps us learn the roster, right? There's 90 guys out there running around. Like, we got to figure out who's wearing what. So it helps us kind of ease into things. But, especially we talk about for the big guys, first day of pads is really when they do their thing. And who do you all eyes on for the first period? It's got to be Maxx Crosby. And you talk about kind of the day that he had specifically against Michael Mayer, and everyone who's been on Twitter or on social media has seen some of the things and heard some of the things that Maxx did to the aforementioned young Mr. Mayer. But I think we got to start here, right? And I think you said it really eloquently, like, that's going to make Michael Mayer better.
Exactly.
Right? Like, Michael Mayer is not going anywhere, nor should he. Right, Michael Mayer is a rookie who 6 months ago was playing in college football.
100%.
Right, Maxx Crosby is an all-pro, all-everything, one of the elite guys at his position. Maxx is going to win a lot of battles. That is what he is going to do. He is going to win a lot of battles, and that's exactly what he did today. I mean, it started early and often, and I think let's just clarify this too, Jesse. Michael Mayer was not the only person that got the business from number 98, right? Yeah. He was certainly not. But, I mean, I think first day of pads, seeing Maxx do his thing, be as efficient, being as effective, showing off kind of the bevy of pass rush moves that he has at his disposal. Like, I don't want to say Maxx is in midseason form on the first day of August. He looks pretty darn good, though.
Look, that man each and every offseason builds off of what he does. I mean, he was in the cage sparring Sean Strickland, He whatever wild thing he could do in his training, he was doing it to get himself ready for training camp, for the season ahead. And obviously it's shown that it's working well because he was doing it in a bevy of different ways, like you said. He was doing it with the speed. He was doing it with the power. You name it. Whoever they put in front of him, he was destroying everyone. And that's what you want out of your dog. Again, like I said, that sets the tone for the whole rest of practice, but also the rest of camp that, hey, guys, this is for real. This is the standard. He talked about the standard that's expected in that D-line room. I think we all saw it today from Maxx Crosby.
And we talk about setting the tone, right? And Maxx, in so many ways, the emotional leader of this team, the heartbeat of this team. And there was a moment towards, I want to say it was like the back half of practice where Maxx jumps off sides, right? He's not perfect, right? He's a human being, right? Where Maxx jumps off sides, he has to go run the lap. Yeah. Okay, great. It's kind of standard issue for everyone, right? It doesn't matter if you're Maxx Crosby or the 9th defensive end in.
Yeah.
You mess up, you're going to go run your lap. But I think the interesting part for me was Maxx runs that lap full of joy, right? I mean, really closer to a sprint than a jog for the Condor, but he taps back in to make sure he doesn't miss his plays, right? So he missed 2 plays while he was running the lap, and he says, hey, I want those 2 plays back. And candidly, we know where Maxx runs. He runs with the starters, as he should. And the guys that were on the field when Maxx went back in were not the presumed starters.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter to 98. He says, hey, I'm not missing a second of work. I'm not missing a single rep of a really valuable practice time. And he went back in there. He did his thing. What was the end result of those 2 plays? They were back-to-back sacks. Maxx yells at Eddie, said, hey, make sure you guys talk about this. Maxx, we talked about it. I promise you, dude, we talked about it. But I think that really kind of sets the tone for what Maxx is, who he is. Like, look, hey, I know I messed this up, but I want to make sure I get my work in. I don't care who I'm running with. I want to make sure I'm doing my thing.
Yeah, and to that point, too, I didn't notice this part of it. Some of the other media guys were talking about it. They said Maxx actually brushed off a coach to go in there on that rep. You know, not respectably, obviously. Sure. To be like, no, I got to get mine. I got to kind of get my get back here. And he did just that. And to note, too, he singled you out from like way across the field. It's not like we were like 10 yards away.
Yeah,
like,
he's got good eyes.
Yeah, he does.
He's got good eyes.
And so, man, at his request, like you said, we got to talk about it because he came back. And that's, again, the mark of a leader. You respond after you make a mistake. You don't dwell on it. You come out there, you do your job, and he did it and blew the plays up. And so that is just so impressive to see. Again, it's early on in camp. Everyone's getting acclimated, but Maxx already seems to kind of be cranked up to 100 already.
100,000 at all times for Maxx. Let's just start with the Jesse Merrick notes from today, Jesse. I know we've talked about Maxx a lot, and for good reason. What else stood out to you during our first padded practice of training camp 2023?
I mean, you know there's nobody else out there that looks forward to one-on-ones more than I do.
I know.
And I'm talking about one-on-ones between the receivers and the DBs, so obviously I'm a bit biased there. But having said that, Davante Adams started things off, and look, we all know what the guy can do, and it starts off with him versus Marcus Peters. Great route by Davante, but I think for me, just the simple fact that it was Davante and Marcus Peters, the 2 dogs in those group, that sets your tone that, hey, these are the guys that are going to be the tip of the spear for us, you know, in terms of the back end on both sides of things there. And Davante, again, just showed what he can do. Another kind of welcome to the NFL moment for Jacorian Bennett as well. Not in one-on-ones, but later on in practice, Davante showed that release, that legendary release, kind of shook him. But again, to Jacorian's credit, Mike, much like we talked about with Michael Mayer, right back in there, right back on his hip. I mean, doing anything and everything that they can to continue to compete and do those things. And so it's that kind of iron sharpens iron thing when you see guys like that. But specifically in one-on-ones, Davante stood out. We always know Hunter Renfrow is going to stand out because that dude is shifty as heck. And anybody that's got the skill set like his is going to excel in one-on-ones.
Yeah, and I think, and this is where I'm glad that you and I, very much not by design, but kind of divided and conquered today. You had your eyes in terms of the one-on-one periods. You're looking at the speed guys, at the skill guys, right? No surprise there. Where was I looking? I was looking at the far field kind of diagonally, looking at the big fellas go do their thing. And I mean, when I was going back and going through my notes from today, yes, Maxx had a fair amount of wins, right? That's exactly what he's going to do.
Yeah.
But overall, I was really impressed with how the offensive line stood up in those one-on-ones. Colton Miller, he's a guy that in the best possible way, I feel like we don't have to talk about all that much because he's just plug and play, as steady as they come. But he really stood up, did his thing in one-on-ones as expected. And I think when I was, we talking about Maxx and all the wins that he's had, but really, credit to Jermaine Illuminor too, because Maxx got him a few times in the one-on-one period, but Jermaine came back and got him as well. So we talk about that iron sharpening iron of guys really pushing each other, of having a chance to, and we hear this from a lot of guys, Jesse, where guys are able to experiment, they're able to tweak, they're able to try things out during these periods because, hey, this is the time to do it. And I think that the fact that Jermaine is going to have a chance to go up against Maxx all the time, to go up against Chandler all the time, I think just really spells good things for this offensive line in general. So yeah, we talk about the speed guys, but the big fellas, certainly some moments of greatness for the Condor. But and I've talked about it a couple times over the past week. I've really been, I don't want to say pleasantly surprised, but I've been like, okay, in a good way for this offensive line as a whole.
Yeah, and that's a huge sign of good things coming forward. I mean, I know Jermaine Illuminor made no bones about it on Twitter, said that he wants to turn he and Colton Miller into the best tackle tandem in the league, and you put that out there, you got to put the work in, and that's exactly what he's doing. And going up against guys like Maxx and Chandler, I mean, you're not going to get better work than that. So that's huge. Again, that iron sharpens iron thing, like we said, and we'll probably say that a million times before camp is over, because that's what's going to happen. So you love seeing that in the trenches. Also, to some other guys that stood out in one-on-ones, to give some love to the corners, because let's be completely honest, like, as a former receiver, one-on-ones are built for the offense to succeed. It's tough on the defender, especially if you run any in-breaking routes, anything like that. And the offense runs plenty of them, let me tell you that, because they know where their advantage lies. But having said that, some guys that were competing, Amik Robertson, David Long Jr., coming in there getting a handful of pass breakups, right there in the mix. Amik got a ton of reps. He was kind of up there for every single challenge. A big camp for him, so you love seeing him get in there and kind of do that as well. So, real excited to see just in the one-on-one aspect, because that's the thing that we miss out on when they're not in pads. You don't get to see real football within those groups. So seeing those guys get in there, like you said, the big dogs, back on the other side of the field, that's something I'm probably going to be watching tomorrow, since I got my fix of one-on-ones with the speed guys. Yeah,
and look, I think the beauty of this time of the year, right, is that there's always something new to see, right? Like we just talked about it. Like you were looking at the speed guys today. I was looking at the big fellas. I'm sure we'll switch over the next couple of days. But the fact that there's 90 guys on the field, right, and a practice, an NFL practice for anyone who hasn't been there, is constant motion. It's constant energy. It's kind of like it's just like a dance almost, but like the most crazy, intense, never stopping dance. So it's hard to really focus in on everything. It's hard to take in the 90s. So you really kind of have to pick and choose and be mindful of where you're looking and who you're looking at. Yeah. So we are going to have a lot more to discuss in terms of the one-on-ones as we progress through camp. But
also, one last thing, before we get going, got to give a shout out to the quarterbacks too for one-on-ones. The knock on Jimmy is, he doesn't throw the ball deep. That dude had a couple nice deep shots, thrown to Devontae. They looked like they were on the same page, So I think we saw Devontae yesterday when they were inside, caught a deep pass and kind of looked at all the media kind of as a, hey, make sure you write this down, almost like Maxx did today. So look, don't believe what you hear out there. Oh, Jimmy can't throw the ball deep. Don't believe that. If there's tape out there, hopefully the social folks pull it out, because that was unbelievable, seeing the connection between the two of them. Jimmy G can definitely do it. Aiden O'Connell also putting the ball on the money in one-on-ones throughout it as well. Had some really nice balls. So real curious to see how that kind of battle back and forth between those groups continues. Yeah, and just on the quarterbacks real quick, too. Chase Garber's back in the mix. I know we'll touch on that a little later in the pod. But yeah, a fourth quarterback now out there slinging the ball around for the silver and black. Another guy that when I was going through my notes, Jesse, that I had his number circled a few times, Luke Masterson. Yeah. A guy really laying the wood during the special teams period. You know that some people like to kind of daze off and dream of what they're going to have for lunch or what they have to write or what kind of TV hits they have to do. When we're doing teams, I lock in, brother, because people make jobs, they earn jobs, and they make themselves a really nice little career out of dominating on special teams. And Luke Masterson, day one, coming in with the pads, laying the wood down, letting people know, hey, I'm here. Yeah. I'm a guy that maybe you haven't talked about as much because of the additions that this team has made over the past couple of months, but do not sleep on Luke Masterson, especially on special teams. Yeah, you love to see that out of him. We spoke to him today as well up on the podium, and he said that he still brings that same mindset that he brought into last year, that each and every day he's fighting for his NFL life, essentially, and that's what everyone on this team is doing. So he comes in with the right mindset. That kid, look, all you got to do is look for the ball. Yeah. And the linebackers, more often than not, that's where they're going to be. We saw it a lot from Spillane today, too, in team when they were doing the inside run drills. I mean, that guy looks every bit the thumper that many of us thought he would be, when they signed him. So he's flying around. Masterson's flying around. I saw Amari Burney getting in the mix as well. Yes. So can we take a 30-second time 100%. Out here? Right. I know you're very high on Amari Burney, right? And it wasn't yesterday. Was it Saturday where he had that near pick? Yesterday. Yesterday. Yeah. It was yesterday. Deep comeback. Yes. It already goes to show you that I've lost track of the days. I know. But I know that going into this process, you're a guy that said, hey, don't sleep on Amari Burney. Yeah. And he's definitely had a few kind of moments here and there where you're like, oh, there might be something to this guy. To note too on that one, it was a route down the field. It wasn't like he was covering a 5-yard out or something like he was covering deep down the field. So that's where I think as a Raiders fan, you look at the guy, the numbers that he had in college in terms of the ball production and what he was asked to do coverage-wise. He's doing a lot of that now here in the NFL. Obviously, it's practice. It's still so early. But he's doing that now and has excelled thus far in the couple times that I've seen him. So real impressed with what I've seen out of the kid so far. Yeah, and look, I know we're going to say this a million times, but for the Amari Burneys, for the Luke Mastersons, for those type of guys, the preseason is going to be absolutely colossal, right? Yeah. Especially, and I know we've talked about this a bunch, the fact that there's only one cut down day. I know, now, it's crazy. There's going to be a lot of guys who are looking for real, meaningful, solid reps, especially when the preseason games start rocking. So Amari Burney, definitely got to keep an eye on now in the short term, but in the medium and long term of preseason,
preseason. Make sure you have his number circled.
Yeah, and I think it was something that people got to realize too with that delayed cut. Like, I think that's going to allow coaching staffs a lot more of an opportunity to mix the groups in together in terms of like, so you'll see many people out there, myself included at times, when the time is right, talking about who's running with the runs, who's running with the twos, who's going with which quarterback, whatever. Like, don't get too caught up in that. Like, this is their time to experiment, throw guys out there, give them reps with everyone and see how they react against some insanely good competition. And then some maybe guys that are a little lower on the depth chart, just kind of mix it all up and see how they all work together. Still trying to get that chemistry among the group.
Especially, it's a great point, especially with both of the lines.
Yeah.
Right? Because we talk about the lines in particular, where so much of what they do is based upon chemistry, of feel, of understanding one another. And we've seen this story play out year after year after year. There is going to be a moment in 2023, whether it's the offensive line or whether the defensive line, something is going to get weird, right? And someone is going to be thrown into the fire and say, hey, big fella, strap your pads on. Like, we got to figure this out for a series, 2 series, a quarter. Well, how do you build up that to have some sort of rapport? You do it now, right? So maybe you take, maybe Andre James sits for 3 or 4 plays when the ones are running, and you see what the backup, you take Colton Miller out. It's this, you see this intrigue, you see kind of this change, and now is the time to do it. And to your point, now with the delayed cut, I think like you said, we are going to see a lot more of this.
I think more of that, and also too, that's something that Coach McDaniels has been honest about at times, that he says he mixes these things up because that's his time, like you said, to do it. Also, too, I remember a couple times last year he said, I instructed the quarterbacks to let it rip, to kind of throw the ball up. I think that's a little bit of what we saw inside yesterday, was the quarterbacks letting it go a bit to try and, one, let their guys make plays, but also the defense as well have an opportunity to go for it, too. So sometimes you'll see these guys, whether you're at practice or listening to us, talking about who had a good day, bad day, whatever the heck it is, like, sometimes these guys are instructed to kind of go for it, to put the ball up for grabs, to allow for other opportunities and to continue to work on stuff.
Yeah, and we talk about the next, 4 or 5 weeks, whatever it is, until week 1, right?
Forever.
Forever, a very long time. It's a chance to not only experiment for things that you want to see maybe, during the preseason, but hey, let's get weird and see what, maybe there's a wrinkle here. Maybe you see something, and I'm just throwing this out there. You see something from Amik Robertson and say, hey, maybe let's put a pin in this. I think this could be valuable for us week 4, right? Week 6, whatever it is. And we see that and we hear that so many times. Like, we hear from coaches that say, hey, we saw this guy in camp that when we put him in X situation, he was really able to succeed. Well, we remembered that from July, and come November, December, that's where it really becomes valuable. So it's a great time of the year in terms of just kind of throwing everything in the mad scientist cauldron and kind of seeing what pops out.
No, that's definitely true. You got to mix it all up and everything like that. And to that note, one of the guys that's in the mix in a lot of different spots has been Jacorian Bennett. We've seen him
another
get a
guy
lot
that
of
you
opportunities.
love.
Yeah, another guy that just even from before they put the pads on. I know I talk about you can only take so much away, but you can see a lot by the way a guy carries himself out on the field, the way that he moves. This kid, real smooth kind of in everything that he does, and the speed, you can see the speed, but it is still kind of sneaky fast. Always in guys' corner pockets, in terms of when they're running deep routes and stuff like that. So been impressed with him, but he's getting a lot of reps and putting himself in a position to get some big-time playing time for this team. I'm excited to see what happens for him, as the weeks roll on, and also, again, in preseason, too.
Yeah, and let's not forget, and it's going to be here before we know it, joint practices. Like, that is where you learn a ton about these guys, right? Where, hey, you can do it against the guys that you know and you're familiar with, but when things get a little weird, and, hey, we're going to go off script for a little bit, what can you do? And we've seen it year after year after year where guys that you say, oh, I felt like he was kind of having, a good start to camp. When you go against someone that's wearing a different jersey, you're like, oh, he's a different kind of guy. Yeah. Like, okay, we can do this. And I think you see both ends of the side, spectrum with that, too.
You do, and also keep in mind, too, the teams that they're going to have those joint practices against, the receiving core that they bring to the table, both of them, and the Rams and the Niners, that's going to be really good work for this defensive back room to really get an opportunity to see kind of what they're made of, especially guys like Jacorian Bennett, too. Because, look, it is a little different when you're doing it against your own team and stuff like that. When you got another guy in there that's, again, fighting for a job, fighting for his life to be able to feed his family, that's when it's going to be like, okay, that's when I have a feeling when we're done with both of those sets of joint practices, we're going to be able to walk away and have a real good idea of, one, what this team's going to look like, and two, what these rookies are really made of.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, or I assume Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler are hoping the exact same thing too, right? Because it's valuable work for them. It's valuable time to see what these guys have to do, especially the young fellas. A few more kind of just highlights that I had written down, Jesse. Robert Spillane very much looks the part of a starting middle linebacker in the NFL. very active. And he just got, for lack of a better term, he's just got the look, right? Like you hear him talk, he sounds like a middle linebacker. You look at the way he moves around, he runs like a middle linebacker. He just kind of has that middle linebacker-ness in him.
He does.
And I feel like we definitely saw that day one of Pats.
Yeah, a little aside, maybe hopefully you're not eating lunch with this one.
This is great, and I missed this one, but this was a great call from you.
You missed this one, but to show you what type of dude Spillane is, early on in practice, I think like day 3 or day 2, something like that, it was hot. They were out there running around. Dude lost his lunch right after they broke the huddle, and it's just out there, but just kept playing, It was spewing out of it, kind of like, I think it was Donovan McNabb, the old videos.
Yeah.
In the huddle. And the dude just kept going, and so you just love to see the nastiness out of him, that like no matter what he's going through, because obviously he was going through it.
Yeah.
He kept going, and he was in there for like 2 or 3 more reps.
Dude, he's like he's one of those guys too. We talk about, these, ex-player wouldn't have been able to thrive in the NFL of the 70s or the 80s. Like, this is a dude, I don't care what era it is, what generation, what decade. Like, this dude's just a football player.
No, I agree.
Like, he's at, I don't care if it's 2 degrees or 120 degrees. Like, he's just one of those dudes. Like, and this is probably not not a great comparison, but I just I feel like he's like a Draymond Green kind of guy where you just need people like that on your roster, right? Like, maybe he's not going to put up 40 points and 25 rebounds, but he's going to do all the dirty work. He's going to set the tone for what you want to be defensively, and he's a dude that you can just count on day in, day out as a guy who's going to be there, he's going to be nasty, and he's going to show up and do his job.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be punching any teammates or anything.
Please don't.
But no, having said that, seems like a good dude. I definitely get what you're saying with the mentality and all that stuff. On the flip side, too, in terms of guys that'll kind of be going against each other a lot, Zamir White. Josh McDaniels talked about that you won't really get an opportunity to see what this guy can do in terms of the physical aspect of his game until the pads come on. He lived up to the hype in terms of what Josh was talking about. Looks every part the guy that's in his second season trying to make that sophomore jump and build off of what he did last year. Really impressed with what I saw with Zamir. He even kind of lowered the shoulder a little bit.
He
did a little
did.
truck stick action.
Yes,
I was liking that.
Yes, he did. Right on the sideline near us, the near sideline where the fans were set up. But, dips the shoulder perhaps a little bit more than the coaching staff would have liked on the first day of pads, but we won't put the guy on blast who he ran over. But certainly let him know that, hey, Zamir's here, and Zamir ain't going anywhere.
No.
And I think that, man, it's so hard with all the backs in general because you really can't get a good gauge of who they are, but especially right now where there's candidly so much intrigue about this running back room for obvious reasons. Like, he's a guy, along with Amir and with Britton Brown as well. It's like, hey, let's really see what these guys can do. Let's see how they can kind of fill out this room, how they can play off of each other. And Brandon Bolden, don't want to forget Brandon Bolden, but how they can really kind of put together a cohesive room and really be one big group going forward.
Definitely. And you can tell the camaraderie between them all, too. Amir, so we have to make sure
Zamir.
Amir was up on the podium today talking, and there's very clearly a back and forth between him and Brandon Bolden. He noted, he's like, oh, yeah, he's going into year 4,000 and all this stuff. And when Amir was getting taped up, Brandon Bolden was kind of yapping at him. So I love seeing that. They talk about not having Josh and kind of missing his attitude and the joyfulness and the jokester kind of that he is in that group. You can still see that they're all still kind of that little like kumbaya within the group, and you love to see that. You need that in order to be successful.
And I think a lot of it too, and I don't want to dive like too deep into it because I'm certainly not a mental professional, but you look at that group and they all do something a little bit different, right? Which I feel like has to kind of play into that camaraderie because it's not like they're not comparing apples to apples, right? Amir is very different than Zamir. Zamir is different than Britton Brown. Brandon Bolden has his own kind of role. Let's not forget Jakob Johnson, one of the true fullbacks in the NFL, right? So you look and they're all different and they all really kind of play off of each other well. And I would have to imagine when they're in the room and they're going through tape, they can kind of pick and choose off of each other's games. Say, hey, I really like that Amir does this. Maybe Zamir can get a little better there, but they're not in competition in the truest sense, if that makes sense.
100%. And as an aside, to give a little love, you brought up Jakob. He was talking yesterday. Nobody more excited to put pads on than the fullback, of course. And I was down on the other end of the field when they started goal line, but I started walking up, and I could audibly hear Jakob on the first rep, the hit that he laid on somebody in terms of leading the way. I don't know who the running back was, but, man, he definitely lit somebody up. That's another guy you just kind of get excited watching those guys do their job with the pads on.
Speaking of goal line real quick, too, Bilal Nichols, I thought, had a really nice goal line period today. A guy that, we haven't talked about a ton over the past couple months. But I think that a guy that certainly has all the characteristics of what you're looking for in that big fella in the middle, a guy who has done it in the NFL at a high level for a decent amount of time. But yeah, like I think really excited to kind of see what he's going to bring to the table in 2023. And he had one goal line stop right towards the end of practice.
Yeah.
He let everyone know about it. Like, he was excited. He was pumping the chest. He was like, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Like, he was a dude who I think really flashed in that period. And I'm excited to see what the rest of camp looks like for him.
Yeah, shot through what I believe was right through the A gap and blew the play up. Like you said, let everybody know it. That was the end of that drill. Look, we talk about it all the time in terms of the pass rush and the coverage working in tandem. If you're going to have just a full total defense that plays well off of each other, you're going to need that pressure up the gut. So a guy like him really popping, continue to have that kind of success is going to be massive for this defense in terms of turning the corner. So you love to see that out of him.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Jesse, let's do this. Let's look at a few guys now that we have, a decent idea, I feel we've painted a nice picture of what the first day of pads was like.
Yeah.
Just kind of in the early goings of camp now that we're about a week into it, more or less, guys that have stood out. Guys that have been like as advertised, guys you say, okay, thumbs up. I'm going to start Maxx Crosby. I mean, stating the obvious, like Maxx and Devontae have looked incredible. They have looked every bit of what we expected them to look like. But another guy, and we were just talking about him, Robert Spillane, I thought has had a really, really nice start to camp. And he's a guy that I don't know how much we'll see of him during the preseason. I would expect maybe a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
But a guy who I've been like, all right, like, it feels, like I said, that he is the prototypical middle linebacker.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with that. Another guy, too, actually, that I think about, Marcus Epps.
Yeah, a really nice near interception today.
Almost today. And the thing, too, is like kind of replaying all the practices. What are we, 6 practices deep in my head?
Yes, practice 6, yep.
I don't really remember, and obviously we don't know the ins and outs of exactly what the coverage is and who's supposed to be doing what, but I don't remember seeing him out of place anytime that I've kind of honed in on him. So, we always talk about it, with the O-line. If you don't hear about them, that means they're probably doing their job. Well, same thing with the safety on the back end. I haven't seen him out of place. And again, almost made a play. It was on Hunter Renfrow too. So doing it against a guy that is death by 1,000 cuts that lights a lot of people up. That's impressive to see out of him, too.
Yeah, and we were talking to one of our friends out of practice today, and he said, really the next step for this secondary, but we were talking about Epps in particular. He goes, it's good that they're where they're supposed to be, but now we got to start seeing them make plays.
Yes.
We need to start seeing some balls on the football. We need to see them being disruptive in the passing game, and we very much saw that today from Marcus Epps.
Mm-hmm. Another guy, too, Divine Diablo, has looked good in coverage, and that's something that Raider Nation obviously wants to see out of him. They want to see him covering backs and tight ends and stuff like that. They want to see him out there being active in coverage. So he's been impressive. Jimmy G, too, I think we even got to give him a shout out, man.
Shout out to Jimmy G.
It's not going to be easy. Look, I know he's been in this offense, but he went from one offense that some people have referred to as like learning Mandarin to another one. Maybe he goes to try and learn French there, and then coming back trying to relearn that language over again. Like, he doesn't look like a guy that's like lost, that's trying to figure this out.
I think I mean this in the best possible way. He looks comfortable.
Yes,
there.
very comfortable.
And I think that, there was the day, today's what, Tuesday?
Yeah.
What was his off day? Was it Saturday? Was his off day? Either Saturday or
I think whatever day Sunday. 3 was.
Yes, Saturday. So Saturday was his off day. And I don't mean this as a slight against any of the other quarterbacks on the roster.
No.
But you can kind of feel when Jimmy's out there versus when Jimmy is not out there.
Exactly.
Right? So I think that's your point, right? The fact that Jimmy is so comfortable, the fact that he has had a nice start to camp.
Yeah.
And he's kind of, I don't want to say easing into things, but there is certainly a plan. There is a method to the madness and how often we are going to see Jimmy over the next month and a half. Big credit to the coaching staff and big credit to Jimmy for getting himself out there and doing what he's got to do.
And I think the thing we can say, too, is each day he's gotten better. Which that sounds so cliche to say, but it's true with him as you continue to watch him. Like, the comfortability to me looked like it was there from day one. Obviously, he didn't take part in all the offseason on the field stuff, so he probably dove into the playbook a lot. He looks like he has that stuff down, or as much down as you could have at this point, because I don't see a lot of like, oh, who's supposed to be where, all this stuff. It's clean and crisp when the quote-unquote ones are out there doing their thing when Jimmy's leading the charge. So very impressed in that regard. And again, in terms of the throws, he's delivering it at multiple, levels of the defense, in terms of the short to intermediate. And again, we saw him drop a couple bombs today as well, throwing it deep. So continuing to build that rapport with his receiving core. You got to like that. Also, he has that bit of an edge. Before they started one-on-ones, he and Marcus Peters kind of already jawing back and forth. So Jimmy has that thing. We heard Maxx talk about it. He was already talking a little bit of smack before day one. He's not afraid to go after people, and you like to see that kind of edge out of your quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, as a guy who we talk about it everywhere he's been, he has won, right? He has just won football games. He is a guy that has endeared himself to his teammates. He's a guy that has won the locker room everywhere that he's been. And how do you do that? You do that by having fun with your guys, by being relatable, by being one of the dudes, by being able to look at the all-pro defensive end on the other side of you and saying, hey, man, you're pretty good. I'm pretty good too, though. Let's see where things go today. So, yeah, I think a great points on Jimmy, and I'm really excited to see what he's got cooking the rest of the camp. What else do we have cooking now? So the Raiders are back on the practice field tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thursday off day. They return to practice on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You and I are recording Saturday.
Saturday, I believe.
Yep, so we are going to be back here on Saturday. But over this next period, Jesse, let's call it tomorrow and then through the weekend, what's the next thing that we want to see from this team?
Yeah, for me, so Amir kind of noted it today. He's like, when you see the pads go on, you want to see the details and the technique maintained because so many times you can kind of get away with that with the physical aspect of the game. So for me, I'm watching to see how clean and crisp the thing is. We did see a couple of false starts, a few offsides here and there, which is expected on day one of pads. So like now let's see day two, how much more crisp they can make things, how much more the technique factor is kind of brought in. And also, again, since I was watching more of the skill players, I want to get a look and eyes on a lot of the guys up front as well and see some of those battles continue to develop and see who really stars in that area.
Yeah, and I think for me, I'm going to have, especially over this next, call it 3 or 4 days, I'm really going to be looking at the rookies and how they kind of respond to this first day of pads, right? Because really the last time that these guys had pads and were going to work, but no offense to their college teammates, they were going to the college kids, right? There is a big difference between going up against a second string right tackle at insert college here and someone in the NFL, right? So the rookies are kind of feeling this out. I'm excited to see kind of how they respond, how we kind of see an increased comfort level from them over the next couple of days. But yeah, to all your points, I mean, just making sure that the crispness gets better, the precision, the accuracy, the execution of it all remains at a high level is something that I'll be keeping an eye on for sure.
No, definitely. And that's the thing too, is like, I think the rookies more than anybody else are going to see the most growth in the next couple of weeks here. And that's where it is going to be really fun to see once, even before we come back on Saturday, like you said, in those couple of days, but after the joint practices, really getting a look of like what these guys are made of, and I'm sure there's lots of note-taking. Coaches talking to a lot of guys saying, hey, look, you got your first taste of it, and the coaching staff will now be looking to see how they respond. So I'm excited to see that tomorrow specifically, to kind of what it looks like for a lot of the young guys.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get a chance to kind of hear from the guys post-practice tomorrow, but I'm always interested to see how everyone's body responds to that first day of pads, right? You're going to wake up tomorrow, you're going to be sore, you're going to have that, like I went to work big time yesterday, and you just want to make sure that everyone is healthy, gets out of that first day, and that will really start kind of stacking days as we get closer and closer to week one. But Jesse Merrick, 30 seconds of plugs. Where can the people find you?
And always on News 3, at Jesse News 3 LV on Twitter. I'll be sending out all the practice videos, talking about all the stuff we hear about in the press conferences and everything like that. And again, watch me every night on News 3. I always have my training camp daily recap of kind of what we saw, what the guys are saying, you name it, it's all up there.
It sure is, and you do a fantastic job, and big shout out to all our friends at News 3, my guy Brian, to give him a little bit of love.
Yes, sir.
Just for fun.
Yeah.
But yes, we are out of here for the next couple of days. We will be back this weekend. So much to talk about, so much to see. We are in full swing of training camp, and it is this is a fun time of year, and I can't wait to do it again. So, Eddie Paskal, my guy Jesse Merrick, everyone else at Silver and Black Productions who helps get our little operation off the ground, we thank you, and we will see you guys this weekend for our next episode of the Raiders Training Camp Podcast presented by SiriusXM.